going to tell you the story of my 2 wild years after leaving the Exclusive Brethren. I've been like a spring tightly coiled for 22 years, and I sprung out into life. I was like a bird free from the cage, and I was able to spread my wings and fly and soar, and I got into all sorts of trouble and escapades and shenanigans, and I'm going to tell you all about it. And one of the reasons isn't just for entertainment, not that I'm saying it's going to be entertaining, it's up to you whether you find that or not. It's because I want people to know, if they're trapped in cults, that they don't have to fear going into this big bad world, because it's not as big and as bad as it has to be. You can make mistakes, you will make mistakes, I did, but you know what, maybe you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. So you'll learn a few of mine, which you could avoid maybe. So I'd get up to all sorts, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Most of it happens in that big city behind me, the city I was born, Liverpool. And so here goes. And here's the first paragraph, and also during this chapter, there's 3 videos because it's too long for one. I'm going to be in different locations just to break it up a bit, different parts of Liverpool and where I happen to have all these sort of exploits and stuff like that. So let's go. The story of my wild years, freedom to explore the world at last. Bonsai trees. If a bonsai tree was suddenly set free from the binds that prevent its roots from growing freely, what would happen to it? Would it launch out wildly with its newfound space or to expand, or would it take things cautiously? I can't speak for bonsai trees, but I can for myself. I launched out wildly and with abandon. I was like the proverbial child in a sweet shop, and it was a very big sweet shop. This is what I've been waiting for a very long time. It took me 3 months to make the necessary arrangements to move out of my parents' house. This is because I was planning my life away from it all I'd ever known. I wanted to get an apartment and move into it and hit the ground running. I had a list of pleasures that I was longing to enjoy, despite still believing they were evil. For starters, the pipeline of filth, a television set. It would be a large 21-inch screen, it was 1988, and a long play video cassette recorder. I would be able to watch unlimited TV, and I could hire out unlimited videos from the video shop. Then there was the radio. I would be able to listen to music and conversations whilst having a bath while in bed the first thing in the morning. I bought a cassette tape player and a record player. Music included Lionel Richie, ABBA, Roxette, Phil Collins, and of course, the Beatles. The day after I moved into my apartment, Scott and Charlene got married in the Australian soap Neighbours. Great timing. Who can forget Mrs. Mangle and Suddenly, that great wedding song by Angry Anderson? Remember the last line? Suddenly every part of me needs to know every part of you. This is what I intended to do in this big bad world. I intended to explore it all. In the first few months, I would stay up until about 3 AM watching TV, enjoying my freedom immensely. I remember being able to sit on my own sofa and without worrying who might be watching me. Watch programmes like Match of the Day, You Rang My Lord, Whose Line Is It Anyway, Hale and Pace, A Bit of Fry and Laurie, and much more. I would tape a week's worth of episodes of the soaps, then watch them all at once so that I didn't have to be in suspense with 4 out of 5 cliffhangers. My favourite comedy was absolutely on Channel 4. This was a group of mainly Scottish comedians with very dry, zany humour. The only time I have ever wet myself, well, a little, was watching one of their sketches where they were confused about the tomato soup they were eating in a restaurant. Do you remember absolutely? In my first year of freedom, oh sorry, did you want to have a look? I used to tape Top of the Pops and make compilation videos of my favourites. I remember the enjoyment I got from listening to Missing You by Christy Berg, First Time by Robin Beck, Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson, Two Hearts by Phil Collins, Downtown 88 by Petula Clark, Especially For You by Callie and Jason, I admit, all the Stock Aitken Waterman hits and many more. After the first year of being exposed to so much music for the first time in my life, my top 5 favourite artists or bands were the Beatles, ABBA, Queen, the Bee Gees and Whitney Houston. Those were the days when they knew how to make proper music, didn't they? Half kidding. If I wasn't watching TV, I was enjoying playing snooker on my 6-foot table in my lounge, while listening to my tapes and records. I created tournaments and challenges and many statistics with many records to break. I also had a dartboard, and I would have competitions between my left and right hand. Though I am left-handed, my right hand was more accurate. I would eat when I wanted, drink when I wanted, and sleep when I wanted. I cannot fully explain the feeling of unlimited freedom with no restrictions after the 22 years of exclusive Brethrenism. It felt like I had been locked in a suffocating prison where you had to stay in for life, because outside there were grievous walls waiting to tear you apart. Well, the walls hadn't got to me yet, and anyway, I always felt a deep inner peace, like I was being watched over and protected. The Jesus I had been brought up to believe in hadn't left me or forsaken me. So, after a few days of experiencing living on my own, it was time to explore. I knew nobody at all, so I wandered into Liverpool city centre. I often came down here to the pier head. First stop was to try out a restaurant. My very first restaurant, Uncle Sam's on Renshaw Street, caught my eye, and I entered this new and exciting world where I was shown to my non-smoking seat by a waiter. I learnt that you are given a menu, you just tell the waiter what you want, and the food comes to you on a plate. My first dish was polla alla crema, which was amazing. Half a roasted chicken drenched in chicken, mushroom and wine sauce with crispy French fries, and salad. I probably had a glass of Coke as I was driving. Then I ordered the most expensive pudding, which was a banana split with fruit salad and masses of cream. I've forgotten the name of it. Might be called a banana boat or something. Anyway, it was now about 11 p.m. and very impressed with my first ever restaurant meal. I paid the bill and walked out with a lollipop. It was a cold, though dry November night as I walked along Liverpool Lime Street towards the station. I had no idea what to expect. I was just living in the moment and loving every minute of it. I came to a brightly lit entrance of a large building from where a loud booming bass noise was coming from inside. It was called the Hippodrome. Curious, I walked straight in, paid a few pounds at the door, and made my way to the bar. I got myself a cola and looked around. I was in a nightclub for the very first time. The club was dimly lit and there weren't many people there yet. I walked onto the circular dance floor to stand next to a large 5-foot speaker. It felt like a pneumatic drill was attacking my body, and my ears were starting to feel numb. I saw that there was a staircase, so went up and sat on my own on a sofa. A few minutes later, 2 girls came upstairs, and after a few minutes, one of them approached me and introduced herself as Lucy. We tried to chat, but had to shout in each other's ears, such was the crescendo. She found out that I was driving, probably because I was drinking cola, and asked if she could come back to mine after dropping her friend off. Not realising what she had in mind, I agreed. Glad to get away from the din, I left the club with a girl on each arm. Lucy's friend lived near Strawberry Fields in Woolton, a few miles away, and after dropping her off, we went back to my apartment. It wasn't long before I had lost my virginity. I saw Lucy a couple more times until we both realised it was just a fling that we had wanted. Within a few weeks of leaving home, I was to recruit an agent for the business I was running, which was selling Larome perfumes. His name was Mark, and he was about 10 years older than me. Mark had been a lead singer of a band, but he wanted to start a new one. When he found out that I played a 12-string guitar, he asked if I would join the new band he was putting together. It was to be called the Timanic and the Manic Ties. Mark was a manic. He was constantly tapping his foot and had a magnetic personality that made him friends wherever he went. He introduced me to the other members of his band, but we only ever practiced a few times because we spent all our evenings in nightclubs. Mark seemed to know all the nightclub owners in Liverpool, and for the month I knew him, we went to about 3 clubs every night till the early hours. A few that I remember were the Continental Club, Pickwick's, the Grafton, the Montrose and the She Club. We would usually end up in a dive in Wood Street or Fleet Street after hours. I drove everywhere as 1 pint was all I ever needed, and I am averse to hangovers. Still am. Mark's quest was to train me how to chat up women. I was clueless. My approach was, when I saw an attractive lady, I would immediately go right up and start chatting her up. This rarely worked, and Mark kept telling me to play hard to get, but his teachings never really worked. Where were you on the 25th of February 1989? I went with Mark to a bar called the Coburg on Sefton Street to watch the long-awaited title fight between Frank Bruno and the then invincible Mike Iron Tyson on TV. The fight was in Las Vegas, so we didn't actually see it till the early hours of Sunday morning. The build-up was electrifying, and we thought it was all over in the first round, and Bruno was hammered to the floor, if you remember. However, with about 50 seconds left in the round, Tyson was caught with a left hook that staggered him for the first time in his professional career. He recovered and went on to knock Bruno out in the 5th round. In keeping with his manic lifestyle, Mark won a mini Metro in a Heinz competition. On his first day with it, the police found him driving it up the wrong side of the M56 motorway. They had him sectioned, and that was the last I saw of him. After a few months, my car came to the end of its life, and therefore my business stopped. I signed on the dole, which turned out to be for 8 weeks. Being all by myself with no support, I had to budget every penny. I was forced to take full responsibility or sink. I wrote a list of essentials, and I remember my supper consisting of 2 pieces of toast, one with rationed cheese and the other with just margarine, Netto's finest. I got a gyro check every 2 weeks. I think it was about £54. One day, the day before my gyro came, I had managed to save £3. Knowing I was getting paid the next day, I went down to the local bookmakers on Lawrence Road and placed a £3 bet on Willie Carson doing the treble, i.e. winning all 3 horse races. I then went home to watch the races on the TV. The horses shot out of the stalls, and to my dismay, Carson was coming last. As the race continued, he came through the field and won by a head. 1 down, 2 to go. The second race was exactly the same as the first. Carson, coming last, advances through the field and eventually wins. Surely he won't do it again, I thought. So I had run a bath and so taped the race on my video player so I could watch it after the bath. Race 3. Carson coming late as usual, so I fast forwarded the tape. As I did, he started to come through the field. I stopped the tape to watch it in real time, and Carson started dropping back. So I fast forwarded again, and once again Carson started overtaking the pack. Real time again, and Carson drops back. Fast forward again, and was to see Carson storm through the field and win his hat-trick, and my hat-trick. I won £70 and was able to have cheese on both slices of toast for supper. During those 8 weeks of not having a car, I would wander into town on foot, which was about a 30-minute walk. I would go down to the pier head at the River Mersey and watch the tide and the ferry boats crisscrossing the river. I loved the pier head with the seagulls, the salty air and the smell of donuts. I had fully accepted that this was my new life now. I felt very alone, but I liked the feeling. I have always been an extreme optimist, and the unknown filled me with anticipation and excitement. After 22 years of suffocating rigid legalism and rules, my freedom felt priceless. I still had a very distant and scant feeling that the door to my parents and the Exclusive Brethren was still there if I should ever change my mind enough. However, for now, I was relishing my freedom and the excitement and adventure of the unknown. So, talking about wanderings down to the city centre on my own, there's a little story I have to tell you at this point. It was one evening, late evening, like it is now actually, and I was walking down Huskinson Street, which I'm turning into right now, and I walked down here on the right hand side, and as I came to the bottom, and you'll see the Anglican Cathedral there. On the corner, which you're looking at, there's just a little story I would like to tell you about. So I'm just going to park up here and park up double yellow lines, get the book and tell you what's happened. Walking down Huskinson Street, just by the Liverpool Cathedral, I turned right into Hope Street, which is there. and was met with a woman, probably in her 40s, right on the corner by that bin there, which wasn't there when I came down here 30 odd years ago. She looks a bit foreign, her hair was straggly, she wore baggy clothes, no front teeth, and she looked a bit ill. "Do you want some business?" she asked me. Not knowing what she meant, I said no and walked on. As I walked away, it dawned on me that she might be a prostitute. I was so ignorant to the ways of the world. Curious, I walked right around the block, right down there, turned right again, came back down here, Huskinson Street, and she was still standing on the corner. And so I asked her what business she was talking about. 10 for a gam or 25 inside, she said. I have a flat around the corner. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what a gam is. I told her I had no money and walked on. However, a seed was sown in my mind which was now racing with curiosity. I had taken a massive leap of faith in following my heart by leaving the Exclusive Brethren, but I was vulnerable. Looking back, I realised that I was not fully loving myself. I am not surprised at why I let my curiosity take me places. I'd been so bored during the previous 4 years, and like a bonsai tree that suddenly finds its roots are free to grow, I launched out naively with abandon. At this point, I want to make it clear that the prostitutes I hired over the next 2 years were not a mature or healthy thing to do. I became addicted to the excitement, which, like many addictions, took over my life and seemingly my free will too. I find it difficult to put in words, but after every prostitute came a deep feeling of desolation, loneliness, and regret. It was like my soul was drained every time. There were significant reasons why I went down this path. I recognise now that I had a deep wound and feeling of sorrow that my parents and everyone in my past had abandoned me, not directly, but because the rules they chose to obey amounted to just that. This feeling was also an internal anger, and my addiction was a way of self-harming myself. This made me feel I was getting my own back on the cards that life had dealt me. I also had a very curious personality and a fascination in what people are thinking. Maybe I inherited some of this from the hours of sitting still in the Exclusive Brethren meetings, looking at the faces with not a lot more to do. To me, a person's mind was like a universe waiting to be explored. I also recognised that I didn't feel loved, and though my parents did love me, their love was very much diluted and restrained by the lifestyle we lived. As John Lennon wrote, all you need is love. He could not have spoken a truer word. I have learned since that everything roots back to either unconditional love or a lack thereof. Where there is a lack, there becomes a hole that requires being filled. I believe that every behaviour of mankind can be understood from this simple fact. Is that right, John? In these 2 years of temporary pleasure, I was not loving myself, but I was on a journey, and I still am. Thank you for watching part 1 of my wild years, but there's more. There's part 2 of chapter 10 called Escape My Wild Years. And in that, I'll tell you how I ended up one night in Soho in a live sex show. I'll tell you how I was held a hostage by a gang of drug dealers on the Wirral, Merseyside, in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll tell you how I managed to run up a £3,500 phone bill. And also I'll tell you the whole story of how I was offered a gift of £50,000. And the question is, did I receive it? I'll tell you everything in part 2. See you soon.